Hey everybody, Adrian here, one of the co-hosts of Sidebar Forever, the new version of the former Sidebar Pop Culture podcast. Every month, Sidebar Forever posts brand new episodes discussing and examining pop culture and art-related topics. However, as a bonus and a reminder to listeners who followed us in our previous incarnation, we're representing some of our vintage back episodes. Many of our classic interviews and roundtables will once again be available in our podcast feed. So, please enjoy this back episode from the Barchives, and don't forget to subscribe to Sidebar Forever on sidebarforever.com, Apple Podcast, YouTube, or anywhere else you get your podcast. And hey, follow us on our socials, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, so you don't miss a single new episode of Sidebar Forever.
Now, Iain McCaig was one of Dwight's top five. His top five.
Let's talk twos on the show.
Somebody he had definitely been pining for. Oh Lord,
yeah, man.
Bless us with Iain McCaig.
Right. At last he came along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have to thank, before we talk about Iain, we have to thank JJ Torres and Dermot Power
and Mr. Leland
Purvis for helping us get in touch with Sir Iain McCaig.
Mm-hmm. It's not what you know, it's who you know.
It's not. It is. McCaig was born in North America, went to school in Scotland. He lives in Canada now. He worked as an illustrator in print before he actually got into the movies. What are some of the movies he worked on?
T2.
Dracula.
Interview with the Vampire.
Harry Potter.
Harry Potter.
Mm-hmm. The Star Wars prequels. And most recently, John Carter of Mars.
Yes, sir. Coming up.
Which I believe is in post-production. So we should be seeing that. Was it next year?
I think so.
I think it's either next year or 2012, but I think it's next year.
And just to clarify, it's not the one you saw on Sci-Fi Channel. It came on earlier this year with the ex-porn star and Lords and
Tracy Lords.
Tracy
she was
Lords.
in a John Carter.
They did a sci-fi TV show that came on, and it was not good. But it was Tracy Lords as Deja Thoris. No, not Red, just skimpy. And I can't think of the guy's name, the actor's name, but he's like some handsome guy from '80s Hollywood, like whatever. Dude. But anyway, keep moving, Swing.
That's right. His art book, Shadowline, which came out in October of 2008, is a must-have for lovers of fantastic art. Mm-hmm. He has won many awards and been decorated for his work in film, and he has been a regular contributor to the Gnomon Workshop videos. Mm-hmm. And he was cool enough to chat with us today about his career in general and upcoming projects like
The Book of Secrets.
The Book of Secrets, an animated film that he wrote the script for, which should be going into production soon as well. So Iain McCaig was awesome.
Yep.
As always. All of our guests are awesome, but he was extra awesome.
Mm-hmm. extra awesome.
You can check our blog entry for links to Iain online, and you can listen for the Easter egg at the end. It might be the best Easter egg that we have ever posted.
It's true.
I think you'll like it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep, dig it.
So let's pick things up with us talking to Iain about his background and where he came from.
All right.
Our best understanding, and we just want to get you to talk a little bit about background, but our best understanding is that you were born in North America, in California specifically, and that you actually went to school in Glasgow, Scotland.
Sort of, kind of.
Okay.
I was born to Canadian parents who happened to be in Los Angeles at the time.
Okay.
So me and my two brothers are all American, and then Mom and Dad just really wanted to get back to Canada, so they went back to Victoria, which is on Vancouver Island, and bought a house. It's just been made. I think it's ancient now, but we were the first ones to move in and make a mess in it and mark the walls. So I grew up there more or less from kindergarten to high school. And so most of my upbringing was up in Canada. I know more Canadian history than I do American history.
Okay.
But I was raised by a dad who was very, very, very pro-Scottish. I actually know more Scottish history than I know Canadian. And so, one day he always said, it'll be time, just watch for the sign in the skies and we'll know when to return to Scotland. But Dad, we never been to Scotland. Well, no, when it's time to return. Shut up, Ian. So then, one day he just I got the call. I actually left home at 14, so I was on my own for 4 years. But then I got the call at 18. It's time, son. Pack your bags and your claymore. We're going to Scotland. That was it. Went to Scotland for the last year of my high school, and somehow it wasn't quite what Dad had expected. People weren't wearing kilts and dancing Highland jigs, in the street and stuff like that. But I loved it. I fell madly in love with Scotland. It's just a great, crunchy old country with just fantastic people and funniest people I've ever met. So I applied for all the writing places I could go, all the universities and stuff, because of course I was going to be a writer. And then just one art school, because just in case, good to have a backup plan. Mm-hmm. And I got into the art school, into the Glasgow School of Art. So I stayed there. Family went home, and I went to art school there in Scotland for 4 more years, and would still be there if only the last publisher hadn't closed their doors on my graduation day and fled to London. So like a lot of young Scots, I just packed my bags and headed to London, went down there to work.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So there you go. That's the history.
So your career as a professional artist actually started when you were still over in Europe?
Yeah, actually, technically, my career as a professional artist started again in California. It was in my 3rd year art school. My parents moved back to San Francisco, and I went to visit them one summer. And I thought, let's get one of those summer jobs people tell you about, and not one in Kentucky Fried Chicken. So which I did work in once, by the way. No offense to Kentucky Fried Chicken. But I remember opening the phone book. I was in Corte Madera, California, and by God, there was this big section at the length of your palm of film studios. And I thought, okay, well, I'll just call and ask for an interview. So I started at the letter A, and by the letter K, Corte Films, I managed to get an interview. And lo and behold, they hired me as an animator. Okay. It was kind of what I was trained to do. So I did Sesame Street cartoons for a whole summer. It was really fun.
Cool. Okay.
The letters A, E, and W. And
sometimes Y? No, that's not how it works.
But I'll tell you, it changed a lot of lives, those letters. And then it was time to come home, and they offered to let me stay and join them as a lead animator. And I don't know, I think I counted the number of drawings and figured, well, that's like 5 seconds of animation, or it's a life's career as an illustrator. So I said, no, got to go back to finish art school. Went back to Glasgow, did my last year, and then went down to London. And then I had 2 more years in Britain, where I essentially did book covers, record covers, everything but stuff in the film industry.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then that was the question that I had for you, Iain, is that at what point in your growth, either as a kid or even as a young adult, did you really become aware of the artists and the designers that are working in film? And I ask because as kids, oftentimes we just enjoy the final product and we don't think, okay, there are people out here who actually create these things and make a good living.
Yeah, remember it was a very different world back in I graduated in 1980, but when I started at the art school in 1974, there was no term concept artist. It wasn't a position on a film. And really you didn't know, I didn't know that artists went and designed things. I knew that they built sets and did the sort of things you do in the stage shows and so on. But a lot of the big effects films hadn't come out, so it really wasn't a career, and if it wasn't a career that a lot of people walked into. Star Wars happened near the end of my art school days, and I was far, far away from the center of that universe. So I wasn't even really aware too much of ILM or any of those companies. So I didn't really know much about it. And then in London, I met some really great filmmakers. Ivor Powell, still a really good friend. He was the producer on Alien and Blade Runner. And, I, as a favor for him, I would come in and do some what are now called concept designs for his latest script. So, I slowly get pulled into that. But there were no artist books. There were no... it wasn't a normal career path, so it really wasn't a choice of mine. I was already doing it when all of a sudden they started teaching it as a separate thing at art schools.
Oh, okay. I was just curious if your original path was obviously to just be an illustrator, and I assume comic books had some impact on you.
Oh, are you kidding?
Yeah.
Oh man, if they just paid, I'd be doing comic books for the rest of my life. I can't earn a living doing comics, so I don't. But storytelling and words and pictures, that's the best.
Okay.
But remember, my first choice wasn't to do any of those things. It was to be a writer.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned that just a few minutes ago. Now, you came up with a hell of a backup plan because you've been very, very successful in Plan B, and I don't know how successful you feel like you've been in Plan A, but certainly, Plan B has been, like gangbusters.
Yes.
Yeah, but Plan B turned out to be Plan A. It took me a long time. I was drawing, and I was really, of course, I love drawing, but I was kind of resenting it too, because really, where's my career as a writer? So I wrote a lot of short stories and things like that. But I didn't dedicate real time to writing, novels, big fat novels or screenplays and things. And then really that's one of the main reasons I came back to America and took the job at Industrial Light and Magic. Because number one, I earned more in a month than I earned in 6 months as an illustrator.
Okay.
And that gave me evenings and it gave me weekends. And all of a sudden now I could start writing. So I did. Since 1990, I have sort of Jekyll and Hyde life as a writer and an artist. I've written 9 screenplays and sold them all. I've had one produced. The film I'm about to go and do is based on actually it is the script I wrote 15 years ago. So, I am a writer. But then, it's like the brick dropped out of the sky and clonk, I realized, you don't have to just write in words. You can tell stories in pictures just as well, and that's writing too.
There we go.
So back on my head, and I realized, none of those things really were made to go and sit on a wall in a frame somewhere. They were really only there to help tell a story. So, in hindsight, I spent my entire career trying to draw stories and pictures.
Okay. I had a question about Terminator 2, and tell me if your IMDb page is correct, Ian. Is that the first major film you worked on here in the States?
Yeah, that's it. When
Okay.
I walked in, I was supposed to start on Hook, and Hook wasn't ready. And they said, all right, well, we have this little film, and we don't know what to do when he falls in the pit at the end. Why don't you sit down and think of some ideas? So, yeah, I walked into probably one of the best jobs you can get, and it's still one of my favorite films.
Definitely.
Awesome.
Well, let me ask you also, Ian, in regards to Terminator 2, working with James Cameron, as late as Avatar, there was a quote that he said that I saw in a featurette where he said that basically when he works on a film, because he's a hell of an illustrator himself, he wants to work with other illustrators of his caliber to produce the best product. How was that working with him on T2? Did you have any interaction with him on that level as far as, your contributions to get that official feedback from him?
No, I was at Industrial Light and Magic, and so I really had, I worked with Doug Chang, who was the art director on that, and really Doug was the one who had all contact with James Cameron. And maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. When I joined, people, were offering me the T-shirt that said, "I no longer fear hell. I've worked for James Cameron."
Yeah.
and I have heard that he picks up chairs and throws them across the room, usually with the people in them. So, I'm not sure I want that extra stuff, but, it's kind of fun too sometimes. I really admire him, and I really admire the work he does. And I did get to do something for him later that I think was on the wall of his office for a while. When Titanic beat Star Wars at the box office, George called me up from London where he was shooting, and he said, "Ian, I think we better congratulate him, do something."
Right.
So I did the big ad that ended up in Variety and Hollywood Reporter, and I thought I would put the Star Wars characters on Titanic and let it sink. And you got C-3PO and R2-D2 clinging to the mast and arguing, saying, "I'm sure this is all your fault."
I can hear that song. I know that the heart goes on.
I did have great Princess Leia standing at the bowsprit with her arms spread and
Han Solo, come put your hands on me.
God.
Oh,
anyway.
But you blaspheme, sir. You blaspheme.
But I've not had a chance to work with him at all since Terminator 2, really. So I can't speak to what it's like to sit in the room with him and go at it. He is a great illustrator. I really enjoyed all the sketchbook stuff he did in Titanic. I thought was really great.
Yeah,
ironically, the one that's super famous, one of Kate Winslet naked on the couch, is my least favorite of the sketches. It's a little stiff and photoreferenced, whereas the stuff they show in the sketchbook at the very beginning, which I know is also his, or at least I think it's also his, wow, I had such life and great line work. So, yeah.
Most definitely. And my question, I just want to ask you, at the time, and I'm trying to remember, how much of a distance was there from Terminator 1 to Terminator 2 year-wise?
Oh, man, probably about 7 years. First Terminator was 1984, and T2 came out in 91.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, even though you were obviously you had a distance from the actual, maybe the heart of the project, you working at ILM, you weren't working directly with Cameron or any of those folks. But did you get a sense then that T2 was going to be as spectacular a follow-up to the first Terminator?
No. No idea at all. You rarely do. I mean, nobody sets out to make a bad film, right?
Right.
And so, you know, it had the same energy and the same hopefulness that any film has. I hadn't even had a chance to read the script on that one. They simply described what it was to me, and it sounded pretty good. But no, when it came together, it was just magic. And like I say, still one of my favorite films.
Okay.
It's and one of those good, rare examples of the sequel for me being better or as good as the original.
Agreed.
Yes.
I would agree with that, and we've actually talked about that before between us. And one of the things that I thought is he took the first movie, which was more of a, you know, kind of a chase and, you know, these sci-fi elements, but he added a heart to the second story by making the Terminator like a surrogate father to the kid. And I thought that took the film up a notch.
Right.
Yeah. That and taking Sarah Connor and allowing that much of a transformation in her character. So there she is, the sweet sort of librarian lady in the first one, and by the second film, she's had one of those life changes that make you gasp. You know, she's on the road, but she's never looked better.
Yeah. She was ripped and cut.
She's fierce. She's a warrior. Yeah.
And she'd lost, you know, any real desire to live, and she sort of rediscovers it in that film, which is a great arc.
I definitely think so. Iain, having worked on many high-profile projects over the years, like
Interview with the Vampire,
and Dracula, and T2, and the Star Wars films, and all that, you've worked with a lot of other really skilled collaborators in your time, and some of whom we've had the pleasure of having on this show, like Dermot Power, and Neville Page and Andrew Jones. And I'm just curious, how does it feel when you hear these folks who were really accomplished in their own way, you know, cite their time working either for you or with you as a turning point in their career and in their development and whatnot?
You know, obviously I feel stupid proud to hear that I had any impact on anybody, especially people I admire, like the people you just named. But I'm also very proud of them, because all I can do is open a door, you know, and only a door to the way that I do things. And if they're able to take advantage of that and actually turn that into something, I mean, really, truly, the kudos go to them for doing all the hard work to make that into something. So yeah, you know, it's great. I definitely thank them, and I'm very happy to hear that. But, you know, they did a lot of work to make that opportunity as golden as it is. And they were pretty damn good when I met them, too.
Okay.
They have a vision for what they want and who they are. They follow that no matter what the industry necessarily dictates to them, and I'm very proud to call them colleagues. And I learn as much as I do from my colleagues as they ever get from me. You know, best school is out there doing it.
Yeah, that's true. Back to what you were saying earlier about Terminator 2, and there's another movie that pops up on your IMDb list is Interview with the Vampire. And what aspect did you do in that film in terms of, was it storyboarding, and did you do those? I've been trying forever, Iain, to try and find those pictures that are being drawn by Kirsten Dunst's character on the ship on the way over from the old land to the new land. And did you do those? Can you tell us who did those?
No, I did all the special effects storyboards. There were, let's see, it was when Digital Domain was just starting.
Okay.
I was lucky enough to be sitting in Scott Ross's office. Scott Ross was the man who was running it at the time, and so he got the call from Neil Jordan, and they asked if he had a storyboard artist. And Scott looked at me, and I went, "Sure, yeah, go to Ireland, work with Neil Jordan. All right." So I got on the plane with Stan Winston, who was going to do the special effects. We flew over, and it was me, Stan, and Neil in Neil's basement. And I would just sit there and draw, and the two of them would lean over either shoulder. "Closer, more glory, bloodier." And I just draw, you know.
Okay.
And you know, in Ireland, they all smoke like chimneys, and I am really not a smoker, so I was in an altered state as I was drawing those boards. Then I went back to California, and I finished them up at home and sent them off. So yeah, it was actually almost every effect sequence beginning to end.
Okay, gotcha.
Altered States, wasn't that a movie?
Yes.
Well, that somewhat.
Now, Ian, with the advent of T2 and Interview with a Vampire, you were right there, or I should say the film industry was right at the cusp of really embracing the next level of digital effects in films. T2 was very much the forefront of that.
Mm-hmm.
How has highly advanced CGI affected like your storyboard process or even your conceptual process? Because I would assume that prior to this, like when dealing with more practical effects, as they used to do in the old days, you storyboarded a certain way. But now, do you find that you have to do more with your storyboards or
less?
Yeah.
I storyboard and a concept design, and again, there's no strong line between those. There shouldn't be. They're really, storyboards are just concept designs in motion, and you know, it hasn't really changed much in terms of what I actually do. There's more of it.
Mm-hmm.
There's more of a demand for it, because typically you would only board the sequences that you needed to work out effects for, unless you're the kind of director that likes to think out his film in boards.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the rare case there. But all it has meant is that there's a new addition to just storyboarding the way I used to do them, and that's digital. And so when you sit down and work out your action sequences, and you literally, you know, you build your characters and you build your sets on the computer, and then you fly through them and you actually pre-visualize the shot itself, that's a much, much more effective way than sitting down and trying to draw action, because you can feel it. There's a visceral something that you get from doing it. I still don't think it's so good at capturing an emotional moment, and so I believe that those are still better hand-drawn. So like I say, there's a new addition to the tools that you can use to be able to visualize something. But hand-drawn storyboarding themselves is pretty much the same as it's always been.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's the same with digital paint as well. I mean, when oil paint first came out, I remember reading there was a rumble in the art world, and everyone went, "What is this new paint that dries so slow, and it's going to destroy the artistic integrity?
Yeah.
Throw it out." Actually, I think they complained about it drying too fast. So at any rate, oil was going to destroy artists and the art world, and of course, it just eventually became a beautiful tool in the toolbox.
Right.
And I remember, you know, reading this exact same thing about digital paint as well. Oh, no more need for traditional art. It's all digital now. Well, such nonsense, because it's just another tool, you know, and it has great advantages. It has great disadvantages. So you just use it for whatever it's best at.
Okay. It's funny you talk about tools, and one of the things that you mentioned in other interviews is how concept art specifically can be presented in many forms, the form of sketches, paintings, sculptures, and what have you. At what point does something graduate from the sketch phase to painting, or are you asked, hey, we need a sculpture for this, straight out of whole cloth so we can start building a model? Like, at what point do you move from this phase to that phase, and how does that move forward?
Well, it's not that linear. It's more, my job as a concept artist is to convey a concept, and it doesn't matter what you do to convey it. So I'll jump on the table and sing and dance if that conveys it best. You know, if I think you need to see something in color right now, as the very first image, because that is the only way to talk about the aurora borealis thing we're going to create, say, then it'll be in color. If not, and it's faster and easier to simply talk about the form of it first before I talk about the color, then I'll just do it as a pencil sketch. It just depends. And it's not a linear thing where, now we're done, black and white boys, put on the other shirt.
Yeah.
You do it back and forth all the time until finally there it is, and you know what you're making, and all you've done is burn through a small art department of half a dozen guys and gals that cost only this much, as opposed to being on the set where it's $100,000 every second. You know, if you blow it, you've lost a lot of money. So it's better to make your mistakes in the art department.
That's what I was kind of curious about. So it's really kind of a matter of your instincts and maybe your relationship with whomever you're working for as to what you think it needs to be at that moment. You can just literally just do what you got to do.
It's actually only all about the story.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with anybody or anything else. At least it shouldn't. You serve the needs of the story, and the director is the conductor who helps to determine where to put the effort and the energy, but just in exactly the same way as when he's directing his actors.
Okay.
You still have to give a performance, and it has to come from you, because if you're just doing a line reading and trying to copy the way the director's telling you to say it, it's not going to feel real. And that's the only value out there, is something that's honest and real.
Okay. Ian, we have a friend of the show. His name's Leland Purvis. He's a comic artist and a writer. And
I know Leland.
You do know Leland. Okay, cool.
I believe we have exchanged emails before.
Okay, all
Awesome.
right. He will be tickled pink that
surely you recognize his name.
Yeah. But he sent us a couple questions to ask you. One of them was, it plays off of what you just mentioned, but he says you characterize much of what you do as essentially storytelling. How much of a narrative and character backstory do you need before you can start on a conceptual image?
Need enough that you can imagine what the story will be, and that sort of depends. Like, suppose you were just going to draw a horse.
Mm-hmm.
How many marks do you need to make on that piece of paper before you can see the horse on the paper? And I guess it kind of depends on what day it is and what kind of horse it is and how well you know it. So I'll wait until the eye and the nostril and maybe the shadow under the chin is there, and then if I half close my eyes, I can see the rest of it. And most people kind of can too. So the same for a story. I need to know who it's about. I need to know what they want. And I need to know why they can't get it. And then all of a sudden you start to see it. And then if you really need it, you need to know what the goofy plan is that they're going to do to get it anyway, hard as it is. And all of a sudden, bang, there's your story,
Okay.
So I need those pins, those things that help hold it up, and then you can half close your eyes and imagine it. And obviously, the more original and unique the story, the more pins you're going to need, because you have no point of reference then for it.
Okay. That's interesting.
It's very
that was
interesting.
I like the way
very astute.
Yeah.
Yes.
A quick.
You realize we'd have paper all over the table. I would have drawn some of these answers. It's so much easier to show this on paper.
No, but the way you explained it actually prevised it in a way for us. Yeah.
No, but that horse thing is much better when you see it.
Yeah. And speaking to that point, the whole process videos you did for Noman several years ago was excellent.
Bless you, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely encapsulated the whole process in a very succinct manner. I mean, you start off with the simple idea of the guy in the tree that was throwing the coconuts down or something down, and he had a choice between staying in the tree or you showed us basically how to hit the basic beats inside of a story from beginning to middle to the end. Mm-hmm. And I found it to be an invaluable source of understanding. So, yeah.
Thanks. Well, that's back to that weird twist in my career path where I ended up drawing stories instead of writing them. So I still find it easier when I'm explaining writing stuff to sit down and draw it. The way I work on my scripts is I take 3x5 cards and I draw things on them, and then I stick them up on the wall. Mm-hmm. And you can draw things from anywhere. You can draw the ending first, and then draw the beginning and draw the middle. And it's just like that thing with the horse. When you have enough things up there on the wall, you can kind of see what's missing. Mm-hmm. And easier than looking at a stack of paper, you can stand back and you see that 3/4 of the way through, there's this big woof moment, and your eye just gets sucked down to there. And like a picture, if you want to balance your story back up, you go back to the part over on the other side and put a little something there and pull the eye back. And, you can visually manipulate the structure of your story. A lot of fun.
Okay.
Now, that sounds very similar to a process that I've seen on a behind-the-scenes featurette for either episode 1 or episode 2, as far as what George Lucas does. You have like a whole wall of those 3x5 cards, and basically he comes. Right. Oh, so that is correct. That's the same method.
Well, that is how we help him with that. But George basically sits home alone in his little writing room and sweats it out. I like to think we helped him a lot, but it's you asked George that question because really truly it's a battle between him and the paper.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's obviously a balance you help him with successfully because you guys do a healthy load of carrying that process yourself. So
I've used that process on a number of films, and actually will be using that on mine, which is the project that I'm going on to right after I do this Disney gig.
Okay.
Cool.
And can you tell us what that is? Are you able to?
I can, because it's mine. I can talk all about it for once.
Most
And I'm
excellent.
glad to that.
I guess you didn't make yourself sign an NDA, so.
Oh, I'm doing that now.
Okay, we need you to fax that to us first, and we'll sign off on it.
Wow, I haven't heard the word fax for a long time.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, if you can, tell us a little bit about what that project is.
Okay. Well, I've got to. About in 2005, I formed a company called Ninth Ray Studios. And it essentially was the old Star Wars art department combined with some of the really great artists I have down in L.A. And we designed a whole bunch of shows, but I realized I'm taking this crack team, and it really was like it really is like the Magnificent Seven. Mm-hmm. And then, you want to do something pretty good with those guys. You don't just want to go and do jobs that aren't really worthy of their metal. And I kind of figured that the only way I could guarantee that would be to try and create the projects myself, and then at least I can guarantee that they'll have lots of input into it and really help guide it. So, a lot of my art direction in that kind of scenario is, thank you, and then we just make it. I have to do 50 iterations of it. So I've been working since 2005 really hard to try and get my own film projects going, and also to get my own book projects out there, so that eventually those become films. You get Hollywood coming to you. And I have got a story published. I have Shadowline. It's out there now, but it does have a fiction story, which is strange for an art book. I have my next book that's hopefully will be published sometime in the next year or two. I can't tell you that title, but it's a pure fiction book.
Okay.
For kids. And then film-wise, I have about 30 projects that I really want to do. So I took 2, and I've been putting all my energy into getting those going. And it looks like the one that will happen first is a feature animated film called Book of Secrets. Oh. And it's from a script that I wrote about 15 years ago. And if everything goes well, I'll be working with an animation company in Sweden, and we'll be rolling on that fairly soon.
Okay,
nice.
You have a lot of personal projects coming up then.
Hell yeah! That's the other point being here.
Now, a little more specificity as far as the Book of Secrets goes. What kind of style is it done in? Is it done in your signature kind of realistic style, or is it more of a animated Bigfoot kind of style, or what do we have?
It's not a cartoon,
okay,
but it is a digitally animated film. I think we're using digital animation right now in one of two ways. It's either photoreal, you're trying to create a sense of absolute photographic reality, or it's a cartoon, and we're sort of stuck in the very nice Pixar, Disney, DreamWorks mold. But there's this massive range of things in between. And if you look at the history of illustration, and you look at the history of comics, you can see how many things that are there that are not either for kids or just hardcore adults. There's every kind of way of an artist visualizing reality. And even Miyazaki, you throw him in there, and suddenly you almost have a third pole as to where you could go. Yeah. So I want to try and put another flagpole out there in something that we actually don't have in digitally animated films right now. Closest I could come would be, for anyone who knows who Arthur Rackham is, it would be like taking an Arthur Rackham drawing and bringing it to life.
Oh, wow. That's very rich.
Okay. Well, damn it, that's the right reaction, folks.
That's going to be incredible then.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see that.
Yeah, I think that'd be a lot of fun to have something like that. It's a nice mix of reality and weird gargoyle-ish fantasy and stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Love some Rackham and some Duloc.
Rackham, Duloc, absolutely.
That's cool.
I was going to say, we have a very short amount of time to actually be able to make the film, so it should be out within the next couple of years at the very most.
Okay, cool. The Book of Secrets.
Yep.
All right.
First here on Sidebar.
Exactly.
The other of the 2 films that I was pushing real hard, I actually decided, I would love to do a live-action film as well. For that project, I have teamed up with Julia Pister. She used to be one of the heads of Nickelodeon. She's now on her own doing some great projects. We worked on Charlotte's Web together and a little bit on Spiderwick. Okay. And so I brought a book to her that I've always loved. It's written by Nick Sagan, Carl Sagan's son. He wrote a trilogy beginning with a book called Idlewild, which is sort of a great dark science fiction by way of H.P. Lovecraft.
Okay.
And I really love the book too. It's very inspiring. It's really weird that one of my best friends wrote it.
Right.
Okay.
You know, my favorite books are by people I've never ever got to meet. But this one I loved, and I called Nick and told him that this was it. This is what I want to really, really work on, and he was totally up for it. So, that'll be a little bit longer, and it'll be a longer production schedule too, because it's a bigger, harder film. It's kind of a Matrix level of special effects and so on. But that'll follow probably hard on the heels of Book of Secrets, I hope.
Okay.
Excellent.
Okay.
There you go.
You got your work cut out for you, sir.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I have on my plate right now. And then, as soon as I get one of them gone, I'll pick another one from the 30.
Okay.
Right. I see what you're saying. Okay. Change the rotation up.
Yeah, I didn't mean that to sound like I'm going to retire. Why the heck would I ever retire?
Right. So wait, don't pull a Drew Struzan on us, man. We can only lose one of you in a lifetime.
That's it.
Hey, I have a Drew Struzan story, by the way.
Well,
do tell.
Yes.
Drew came around the art department when we were working on episode 1, and I've always loved Drew's work. Always, to pieces, loved his work. But I missed the introduction, so I didn't know who he was. And he came around, and I think he was standing behind my shoulder, and I believe it was as I was drawing Darth Maul. And this very soft-spoken, really, really nice person leaned forward and said, "Do you realize when you're drawing these things, you're drawing icons?" And I turned around and said, "Whoa, I thought I'm drawing an icon. I couldn't draw, okay? I'm just drawing." And then he looked at me, and I swear his voice dropped 3 decibels. And he said, "Get used to wielding power." And then off he went. And I'm thinking, who the hell? And somebody, I think it was Doug, came over. Yeah, that's Drew.
Oh.
Wow.
So I've never forgotten that. I'm still not used to wielding power, but you are making things that do affect a lot of people. And story, apart from being something that I love, the story is immensely powerful, and you've got to use it responsibly. So I'm still trying to get used to wielding power.
And what a lightsaber to wield.
Yeah.
Because, Darth Maul, let's just talk about Darth Maul for a minute if we can. What is it like to see one of your characters like Darth Maul fully fleshed out and then to have them, be so interested and engaged in it to where it becomes like a full bodysuit underneath it later on?
Yeah, it's more than that. It's not really about the suit and so on. A very proud moment was at Halloween, because I believe that Darth Maul and Queen Amidala were the best-selling boy and girl Halloween costumes that year. And I got to walk around Halloween and, just wanted to embrace every child I saw. But for me, like when I was a kid, I had grown up with the Dory illustrated version of Dante's Inferno. Really loved it. But hell was always the more fun place. You go to hell, and there's all these roiling, naked bodies, and they look like they're having a really great, miserable time, but it's fun to look at.
Right.
And then you get to heaven, and heaven is just full of people who look bored. And they're standing around in their white cloaks, and they're playing harps, and they're like wishing they were down there with the naked people. And so, since I was a kid, I just thought, you know what? When I grow up, what I want to do is I want to draw powerful good. And I want to make it better than powerful evil. But you can't wimp out. You can't make evil less to make good better. So obviously I had to learn to draw powerful evil really well too. It's just that good is, I really truly believe that good is a more powerful emotion, but it's harder to portray. So really Star Wars for me wasn't about Darth Maul. Star Wars for me was about Darth Maul and Queen Amidala. And it's the classic Beauty and the Beast story, and you suddenly have a very, very powerful character that is embodied in Padme Amidala, and you've got this very evil character embodied in Darth Maul. And it was the balance of the two that made both of them work as well as they did. So really it was the joy for me was in trying to bring out a character that people actually remembered and loved as much as they loved Darth Maul. And I know that there's still so many people at the conventions get dressed up as Padme in white face makeup with the blood red lip,
right?
The finger,
kind of a kabuki.
So, well, Kabuki, sort of Elizabeth the First. You know,
Okay.
The rule was kind of if you found it in 3 different time periods or 3 different countries, it probably was an archetype. And white face paint, definitely, it's there. It's all over the world.
I think my favorite costume of hers is the one where she's standing in the window just before the occupation happens. She's got those golden globes on her raiment.
Yeah, absolutely, mine too.
Love that.
Absolutely.
Love that.
Oh, I was so happy with that.
Yeah.
That one, when I draw, I mean, I'll say this now, I am not a costume designer. I am a character designer and a storyteller. If it wasn't Patricia Bigger, who is a great costume designer, that came along, looked at the drawings, and actually made them work, you wouldn't have seen any of that stuff. But when I was drawing that one, I just go from the gut. So I'm drawing from the head down, I get to the bottom of the dress, and next thing I know, woo, out comes these little egg shapes that go around the bottom. And I had no idea what they were. So I'm showing that to George the next day at one of the meetings. And he comes around and he goes, what are those, Ian? And as usual, I opened my mouth and an answer comes out. And I went, oh, they're lights, George. And he goes, well, won't that be kind of heavy? And I go, oh, no, those are very lights, George. And he smiled and said, show me. So I had to quickly call ILM and said, help, please, I need a light. And bless them, they sat down and built one that was so light it practically floated. So it got approved. And then Tricia was just smart enough to come in and realize that you have to plug all these in, or else you're going to be replacing batteries all the time. and a bunch of guys crawling under poor Natalie Portman's dress to replace batteries is not a good idea. So she made a hoop dress.
Okay.
And had the wire running around the outside of the hoop dress.
Okay.
The only problem with that is that, I don't know if you've ever worn a hoop dress, but apparently when you sit down, woo, up it goes in the air. I believe they had, when she sat down in that throne room chair, I believe they had to nail her dress to the floor.
Wow.
Okay.
So, anyway.
That's crazy. I guess it kind of explains probably why it's the first thing you see her in when she's when she's talking to the Trade Federation guy, and he has that dress on in the beginning. Because you can't see.
I can't condone a course of action that leads to war. Yes, I remember that.
Yes. And he has quotes, too.
That's it. Iain McCaig, your geek is very strong.
Just on stories I really enjoyed. So, yeah.
Ian, you talk about like collaborating and working with others and George and different departments and stuff like that, and getting help when you need it, too. There's a story that Dermot Power told us, and I hope I'm recounting this correctly, but he just kind of described you as starting the day by saying hello to everybody and chatting quite a bit about things and progress, and then getting to work yourself. And he described it almost as if you're absorbing everything you could about the story and the project from your various collaborators, and then maybe using that as fuel or something. Is that about right, or is that at all accurate?
Only when Dermot's looking.
Ah!
No, it's just, it's different. Every moment's different. Every time is different. Keeps it really fresh and exciting. I think when Dermot was there, absolutely. I think I really, really loved to try and grok the entire film and story. So I wanted to see where everybody was and what they were doing. And almost like a puzzle piece, then you can see what's missing.
Okay.
And then go and draw that. But also, Dermot and Tricia and I sat at that big table together, went through just a stack of inspiration and reference that Tricia had brought, and made tons and tons of visual notes to copy all that stuff down, and so we'd remember it. Because if you draw it, you remember it, right? If you actually do it, it sticks in your head better. So a lot of my walking around, I was drawing in my head. I was mulching around the ideas and trying to put them out there. The job I just did for Disney this last week was completely the opposite. I got a one-line description from the man in charge.
Okay.
And I knew it. I saw the entire thing. And it really was a race to get to my drawing board each day to pour those out before my head exploded. And I've never drawn more pictures in my life in a week. And it's just because it was all there. So sometimes it's there and you see it, and other times you kind of need to see what's missing to see it,
Okay.
So
working with Dermot was the most fun. I loved that to pieces. We are so completely opposite. I'm sure he didn't tell you this, but Dermot is the anti-superstitious man.
Yes, he did tell us.
If he can't put his finger in it, it didn't happen. And me, Are you kidding? I believe in UFOs, ghosts, just about everything I've ever bumped into that you can't explain. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I believe. And so Dermot and I would have these long discussions as to why I was completely nuts and something didn't go. And I'll quote you one, and you go back to Dermot and ask him how he explains this, right? So actually, here's two. I'm sitting at my drawing board. Dermot's sitting across the room at his computer, and I realize, Padme, now she's younger. She gets to do some sporty things in this one. God, it'd be so cool if she had this giant bird of prey in her hand. So I sit down and I'm drawing this, and just as I finish the last bit of the bird, I get this, Iain, I've got this great idea. And then he, pardon the Irish accent, and then he whips the screen around, and there's Padme with a bird of prey in her hand.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which, of course, was pure coincidence, right?
Right, creepy, eerie.
Some sort of psychic link, obviously.
Right.
There was another time that we're standing at Dermot's desk, and both of us heard clear as day a meow right at our feet. And Dermot went, "Oh, a cat." And we looked down. Of course, there's nothing there, because the cats had been banned from the ranch ever since they peed on George's desk. And so I went, "Dermot, you see the ghost of the cat. You heard the ghost of the cat." No, it says the floorboard. We weren't moving, Dermot. Yeah, I would work with Dermot in half a heartbeat. He was just the most fun, and his work is so fantastic.
Yeah.
So Dermot's the one that manages to march to his own drum, and when some of the trends, which are just they're come and go trends, like right now, it's make it super photoreal, make it so real, it's like a shot from the film. Yeah. And Dermot's realized that is just it's a momentary thing, and it really doesn't solve the problem, the design problem, any better than the loose sketch does. And Dermot's doing things his way. He's doing his kind of drawings, and doing quite handsomely out there. Thank you very much.
Oh, excellente.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, what can you tell us about John Carter, Warlord of Mars, sir?
It was the cursed movie. It was the one that they've been trying to make almost as long as they've been making movies. Yeah. And I believe that it was written by Edgar Rice Burroughs in his 40s, when he had failed at just about everything he'd ever tried to do.
Yes. Yeah.
He's there with a wife and some kids, and he's selling the ads in the back of the Pulp Fiction magazine. And reading the stories and realizing these are crap. I could do this.
Yeah.
So he sits down and writes Princess of Mars, and out it goes, and it's fantastic, and becomes a worldwide sensation. And it encourages him enough to sit down and write his second book, which was Tarzan. And then on he goes in franchise after franchise. He's Pellucidar Hollow Earth franchise and Carson of Venus. All these things come out of him, and then he starts to write sequels. Maybe there's 11 sequels to the John Carter stories. And, instantly becomes wealthy enough to buy his own town, which he named Tarzana. So everything's going great for him, and then along come the movies, and Tarzan, well, we just take the clothes off and give him a loincloth and a monkey, and we can make that movie, right?
Right.
You want to make John Carter of Mars, which they did, but what do? You've got armies of six-limbed blue-skinned Martian warriors.
The Barsoom, yeah.
Yeah, John Carter can leap tall buildings with a single bound, and how do you do all this stuff? So it didn't look like it was going to catch that updraft, but no, along comes animated films, and no one's ever done an animated feature, so they reckon we'll do John Carter of Mars. And there's all sorts of tests Bob Clampett did, and it was really soaring along, but then I believe that they were trying to do it as a comedy, and Burroughs came in and went, "Are you kidding? I was actually serious." So that fell apart.
He was very serious.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs becomes the film instead. And every single time that John Carter caught that updraft, it faded away and it came crashing down. So I worked on 4 different versions of this film.
Wow.
Yeah. Once for me at ILM, and once for Carrie Conran, which was just great fun, for Paramount. And really that's when Ninth Ray Studios was born, because I sort of put together a team there and kept them afterwards. That became Ninth Ray. And then once for John Favreau for Paramount.
Right. I heard about that too, yeah.
It was a lot of fun. John was great. John got it. John made a fantastic script for that. But then they said, "Would you like to direct Iron Man?"
There we go.
And then I was lucky enough. Jim Morris called me back to assemble the team and do all the pre-development design for John Carter of Mars for Pixar. So every time it had to be different, or I would be sued.
Okay.
And it was fun to come up with a new version and realize what is constant and what is just your taste of the day, what really can change in this movie. So I'm proud of the one that we did for Pixar, and of course now they've broken the curse because they've actually been out there shooting principal photography for quite a few months now.
Okay, so it's officially a go then. That's what we've heard. When the principal photography starts, that's it.
Oh, that's it. Game over. The curse is broken.
Okay,
good. Awesome.
All right.
That's kudos to Andrew Stanton and his whole group. Yeah, truly impressed.
So it's an animated film if it's Pixar then?
No.
No? Okay.
No. Here's where Ian treads carefully. It will almost certainly come out as a Disney film, not as Pixar. Pixar make films like Toy Story and Up, and I think it would break their branding to include a movie with fields of aliens slaughtering fields of other aliens, probably.
Okay.
So it will come out as a Disney film. It's not being made at Pixar. It's being directed by Andrew Stanton, who's a part of Pixar.
Right.
But the teams are mostly freelance live-action teams that have been put together for this, which is where I came in. I wasn't part of Pixar. I came in, I worked there, but I had my own group, and we did our thing.
Okay.
Excellent.
Okay.
Wow, that's highly tantalizing.
Yes.
It was live action with animated sequences in it.
Okay.
Same as any special effects film.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be good. It's interesting too. There's some real interesting design challenges in John Carter that still, they perplex people. For example, back in Burroughs' days, it was okay to just write that everybody was naked, which practically everybody was in this story. But of course, if you film that, you're in the wrong rating group for the kind of story you're making. So how you deal with the nakedness and really, John Carter's all about innocence. You got to keep that feeling, first kiss, first fight on the playground. So the nakedness adds to that, and you really have to honor that in some ways. So you'll see when you come out. But then a big part of the problem with the nakedness too is the beautiful Deja Thoris and her race of people are all red-skinned.
Yes.
Right? John Carter is a white-skinned guy from Earth. Well, you put a white-skinned guy next to a hot red woman alien, and he looks anemic. It just doesn't work that way around, and he just looks so pale and like, oh, dude, get out more. Even with a suntan, we had to find exactly the right shade of red for Deja for that to work. But anyway, you'll see.
Okay. Ian, you mentioned your work on John Carter and all the various iterations going back to Edgar Rice Burroughs, the original prose, and then all the things that have followed since then. And I just wanted to ask you, as far as the recent passing of the great Frank Frazetta, because he's done paintings of John Carter of Mars that are fan-friggin-tastic.
Indeed.
Yeah, he did the paintings of John Carter of Mars.
Most definitely. And I was just wondering if you could, maybe briefly, I don't even know if there's even a story behind it, but if you could just talk a little bit about Frazetta's impact, what you were thinking when you heard that he had passed away.
Sure. Well, when he passed away, I immediately sat down and I don't drink, but I raised a glass of something to him to wish him well. He is the master to me. He is one of my three heroes growing up, still one of my heroes. When he was still alive, Roberto Rodriguez was going to do a version of John Carter of Mars, and I believe he was successful in having Frank Frazetta even as an advisor on the project, which was great.
Yes.
We obviously, Terry Conran felt the same way, and I believe we were trying to honor his work there too. By the time it got to Pixar, I remember there was sort of an unfortunate statement that, not by me, that we were trying to avoid Frank Frazetta's look because that was kind of old and tired. And quite rightly, the fans pounced on that and would have killed anybody now wearing a Pixar T-shirt for saying it.
Right.
Yeah.
That wasn't what we meant. What it was more that this imagining of John Carter of Mars, we had this just go back to Burroughs. So we're going back beyond Frank and just saying, what is the story dictating? And of course, Frank's solutions were classic, and it's impossible to avoid them, and we didn't want to avoid them, but we didn't actually look at Frank Frazetta or try to do an homage to any of his things for the Pixar version. We really were trying just to honor the Burroughs story. That does not mean that it won't, God hope, we're this lucky, be as good or have the same passion that Frank poured into those John Carter images. And for me, they're still the embodiment, kind of like Tenniel's Alice. It's the embodiment of the story. But anyway, there are many different ways to say it. I mean, just like with Tenniel's Alice, Arthur Rackham illustrated Alice as well in a totally different way. I've illustrated Alice. If you go back to the story and forget the drawings, you can imagine it a different way. You need a different through line. You need something that means something to you, that is your reason for doing it, and then that guides all the drawings. For me, in my Alice in Wonderland drawings, because I love everybody's versions of these of this story. It's one of my favorite stories ever, and I think it's been well illustrated. But nobody makes Alice smile, which is nuts.
Yeah.
She's 7.
Huh.
You know a 7-year-old that doesn't smile? I don't.
No.
So, plus all this crazy stuff is inside Alice's head.
Right.
I don't care how normal she tries to be. You've got to have a glint in her eye that she's either about to laugh or that Mad Hatter is from her.
Right.
So that's my through line, and anything I draw for Alice has that tint in it. So really, that's the same thing we tried to do in John Carter. We tried to find our through line and follow that through.
Okay.
Man, speaking of your through line, something else came to mind when I was thinking about the Noman video series. You were talking about, the idea of the beats inside of the Noman video series. You also did a very interesting remake of Little Mermaid. That was fantastic. Was that a pre-planned? You said it wasn't when you sat down to the paper, but I mean, you actually came up with, like, I can't get the word out right now. Yeah, iconographic imagery, which really would do well in a story in and of itself without having to have the prefix or the idea of Little Mermaid attached to it. I mean, it was a totally standalone series. I like to just say that, and I'd like to see where you like to take it from there.
Well, first, thank you very, very much. That means a lot, because I like to hear back from the audience and to hear that it had an impact. I truly, honestly wrote that in front of the camera. I went with no preconceived notion of what that was. Well, that was the point of the DVD, was that here's the process. And if I planned it, I would have been lying, and that's the worst sin in the world to me. Honesty is the greatest good you can do. So I wanted to make the story honestly there for everybody, and even if it meant that Ian flounders around for a while, people should see that too, because I wanted to show this is the creative process. Here's what it looks like, warts and all. At the end of it, we stopped after 4, but there's actually 8 in the series, and I am doing the last 4 with Noman, which is we finish it. We actually make it as a movie. So the 3 more are going to be the actual making of that film, and then the last one is the film, and then the finale is that we're making it to submit it to the Academy for an award. And if we do and we're successful, I will try and bring the camera with me so that you can see what it's like to be on the stage accepting an Oscar. And if we fail, you can come to the bar with me and send me for a drink.
You're going to lift another drink.
Exactly. Salute.
Have a drink. No, but the point of the whole series was, I think anybody who wants to should be making stories, either as films or books. And here's how you do it. And I want people to honestly see, here's the process. Just whether this is your process or not, here's one way that it worked, and you can try that, and it might work for you.
Okay.
And then in the meantime, I'll probably bring out that story as a book, and I don't know which will come out first, but there will be a book of, it's called Star Child, and it will come out at some point.
Ian, I wanted to ask you about Shadowline, your art book that came out at the end of 2008. I personally have not seen it, shamefully. I have not seen it with my own eyes. But Leland says it is a sight to behold, and I know you said it in an interview or something that I saw online where you said you spent a year and a half putting it together. Obviously, I assume you were doing that in between your normal work. You were, busy trying to make that happen. But how proud are you of the book and the project as a whole, and how well it's been received and it's respected?
Oh, I'm proud of all my kids that get out there and get seen by the world, including my real kid. So, no, it was a blast. I really enjoyed doing it. No, most of that year and a half, I really took off and worked on the book. Most of working on the book meant begging cap in hand for my illustrations because the studios tend to own everything, and they shouldn't. The original artwork should belong to the artists who did them unless it's compensated for, and it's not in current fees. And you should always retain the right to show it in retrospectives of your work. William Stout is fantastic at putting that into really obvious and succinct words, and he's fought for those rights for his whole career and managed to get them. And he's very, very good at making sure that people remember to stand up. Because every time you don't, you set artists' rights back hundreds of years, as he pointed out to me when I gave up my rights on John Carter of Mars. So I make sure that's always a part of every contract I do now. I didn't have that for most of the work in the book that was for film. Okay. And so it took a year and a half of insane bartering and begging with some of the studios. Other studios, and I'll name the ones that were great. I mean, Disney and Pixar, my God, were fantastic. And let me show anything and everything. Lucasfilm was a doll. They let me show tons of Star Wars work in the book.
Oh yeah, Darth Maul was in everything. Yeah.
Everybody, yeah. Then they do a couple of neat things. They were just great. So it just depended. But there were some companies that were really difficult and really would only let me use a tiny, 4 out of 1,000 drawings kind of thing. So that's what took so long. Writing the story was very quick because I know that story. That story is a trip through my head, and the whole point of doing the book was to tell that story. It was a real fiction story.
Okay.
The interviewer comes to get the interview for the book, and I don't show up, essentially.
Right.
Yeah. And so he has this journey through my mythical, strange studio that exists in a different land, and these weird creatures that live inside take him on their own kind of journey. And, of course, he has to watch out for deadlines because they run amok everywhere.
That was the coolest thing when I saw the video of you talking about it online. You were talking about that whole thing and how it's presented, and and again, it kind of buttresses the idea of you as storyteller. That's even with an art book, which most people, I did this when I did that, and I was thinking about this, and I was influenced by this, but you actually made it made a creative story out of presenting your art to people who just love and appreciate it. So.
But don't you think so many books are? I mean, so many films about artists. You see the brush going across the canvas, and then you see the furrowed brow, but none of that has anything to do with creating art as I know it. I mean, truly, you get up in the morning, you stagger up the stairs and into a different land. And in that other land, there's these massive forces allied against you and wonderful magical allies that are on your side, and you simply go to battle. And in the midst of the battle, you might have this it's strange muses flying overhead that either curse or bless, and it truly is like Lord of the Rings up there. And then all of a sudden you hear a voice downstairs going, "Yeah, time for lunch." And you stagger down the stairs again, and you want to go, but I see. You can't even explain it. It was too magical and otherworldly, and coming back is hard. So anyway, I wanted to write about that other land. It's really important because that is drawing to me.
Wow.
So that's the book.
Fascinating, sir.
Now you mentioned, Ian, as far as having your children be seen in the world at large, both creatively as well as personally. Now you do have a daughter, I believe, that's also an artist.
A daughter and a son.
Okay. A family affair.
Oh yeah.
Now, how proud of you are you of them? I'm sure you're proud, of course, but to see them also succeeding, in the same field that you've made your mark in, it has to be just a wonderful feeling. Yeah.
Very grandizing.
Obviously it's wonderful. Obviously I'm proud of them. But it's a hard thing to have to go out and be judged before you have had a chance to make your mistakes. So I know that the art school that my daughter went to, when she went there, sometimes she was called Daughter of God. There's a naked person in front of you. You're about to make your first mark ever in public drawing this, and someone goes up, Daughter of God. How do you do it?
Right.
Wait for this. One of the teachers said to her, do you mind if I stand behind you and just watch how you do it?
Wow. Wow.
Whoa.
The pressure's on.
Seriously.
Oh, the pressure's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And, God bless them, the two kids managed to just let it run off their back like water. At least that's how it seems.
Yeah.
I'm sure it gets to them from time to time. But if they had done that as doctors, nurses, people on the corner with cardboard signs, whatever it is they've done, if they were happy and they were following their dreams, I would say they've had a great life. And I'm just as proud of them doing that as anything that they're doing right now.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
That's really, it's important. It's important to follow your dreams, and it's important to make a difference in the world while you're here.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, of course, I love the fact that I get to work with them both. Inigo's, that's my son, is finally fully trained as an animator, and I'll be hiring him for the Book of Secrets project. Come and join me on that.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
My daughter's a member of my company, Ninth Ray Studios, and she's designed 7 or 8 different films with me already, and then ran off and worked on Iron Man by herself.
Yeah, I heard Iron Man 2, right?
No, on Iron Man 1.
Iron Man 1, okay.
Yeah, I bet before they, could be cocky because they didn't know if it was good.
Okay.
But, she's designed 3 of the 4 John Carters that I did, including the Pixar one.
Wow.
She's fully fledged concept artist and great storyboard artist, and I really love the work she does. So she'll be the one that if I suddenly drop in the midst of Book of Secrets, she'll just pick up the directing baton and finish it.
That's awesome. Well, let's hope not. That's not the case, but we appreciate your confidence in her ability.
If you got to drop anywhere, drop in the middle of doing something you love.
That's very true. There you go. Very true.
I think a long time back when I was doing Dungeons and Dragons, those Choose Your Own Adventure books for Games Workshop and for Ian Livingston.
You did those?
I did. I also did a Jethro Tull cover that's tattooed on certain body parts.
Yes, yeah. We were going to ask you about that.
All right. I remember there was an interview back then in one of the magazines, and favorite food, apple pie, of course, and how do you want to die? And I thought, whoa, obviously at the drawing board.
Right. Okay.
And I realized after I said that and it got published, I probably just cursed myself. That's probably it. I am going to die at the drawing board now. And I do think about that as I'm at my drawing board every once in a while. But, honestly, if I could choose, I would love to be drawing the face of something powerfully good, something like a Padme, and have that looking back as you're starting to look away, as you're starting to recede from the world. I can't think of any better way to go than that.
Yeah.
The only really terrible way to die would be to die in my sleep and miss it.
Well, that concludes another edition of Sidebar. I'm your announcer, Kay McFarland. Sidebar is a podcast on the subjects of comic books, art, and popular culture, created and co-hosted by Dwight Clark and Swain Hunt. Any questions, comments, or suggestions for the show, give us a shout at sidebarnation@gmail.com. That's sidebarnation@gmail.com. And you can also subscribe to the show for free at iTunes, Podcast Pickle, Digital Podcasts, and all the other podcatcher sites.
We have a game. We haven't played it in a long time, but we thought it'd be kind of cool to play it with you if you're up for it.
I'm up for it.
Okay, it's called Either Or. Choose one, no more.
Right.
And your choice is based on whatever criteria that you hold to.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
We'll just present you with 2 choices, and you just say what your choices are, and we may actually chime in a little bit, but it's just a way for us to kind of have fun.
All right, I'm up for it.
Okay.
Let's do it.
All right, here we go. Question number 1 is Lucas or Cameron?
Lucas.
Foiled again.
Yes. Yes.
I hope you got bets on this.
Right.
There's money on the table, Ian.
Just can't see it.
Nothing moved but the money.
Right. Okay. Number 2, Alien 1 or Aliens the sequel?
Alien 1.
Yes.
Really?
I can't
Oh, hell
that,
yeah.
dude.
Aliens is a fantastic action adventure film. Alien is a classic.
Mm-hmm.
And came out of nowhere.
Purely for the reason that it was, like you said, it was unexpected. You weren't expecting any of the action to happen. The creature wasn't fully developed as far as being able to do the prosthetics for it, so they kept it in dark most of the time. So it was more of a psychological thing. So
that's part of the reason I suppose that they presented it almost as a horror science fiction as opposed to just straight sci-fi.
Right.
Which is
but it's a classic film that did something really daring in its storytelling, which is to take what you know is the main character and kill him.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what they were going to do after that because there's nobody left to lead them. And I had no idea it was going to be Sigourney Weaver that took over. It's hard to see that in hindsight now that we know the whole series.
Right.
But true, when that film first came out, that was so shocking to take the captain out so early on.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
I thought for sure Yaphet Kotto was going to be the hero.
Well, he could have been. He's a great actor.
He is.
That's hilarious.
I'm joking.
Right.
All right. All right, next question, Ian. Terminator 2 or Avatar?
Oh, Terminator 2.
Yeah,
Right.
see, that's and I gotta go with the classic.
Yes.
Here we go, Ian. This is a tough one. Matrix 1 or Blade 1?
Oh, Matrix 1.
Yeah, I think so.
I remember when we were doing episode 1, and the Matrix came out. We looked at each other and said, "Oh my God, everyone's going to say this was the year of the Matrix."
It is.
Yes.
And it just was.
Yeah.
It was such a flawless, perfect film.
It really
It's
was.
such a shame that the sequels didn't do it justice.
Yes,
Exactly.
I concur
Yes.
wholeheartedly.
Well, yes.
I support you in your beliefs, Ian.
Yeah. As he stares at me, expecting me to react and say something, which I will now, because to me, I think it's. I like the trilogy. It worked for me. I can get inside the heads of the characters and where they were going with it. And I appreciated it. But that's just my strange world. That's Dwight's strange.
Yeah. No, I knew there was somebody out there it worked for. It wasn't me.
That's funny. Okay, here we go. This is a trick question. A New Hope or Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yes.
I gotta say it, yo. I gotta say it. Yeah. Ian, you got the two of the three of us with our arms in the air.
I'll co-sign on that too. Yeah.
No offense to A New Hope. You're saying like you want Diamond number 1 or Diamond number 2. They're both great.
Right.
Yeah.
Classic films. But Raiders was just caught something I didn't expect. Took an action hero, gave him a really new twist. Mm-hmm. And when he's dog tired at the end of the day, sits down to kiss the girl and she whacks him in the chin with the mirror. Yeah. That's my life story after my drawing board. I'm there for him.
And Raiders was a self-contained story. Like it didn't need anything else.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I don't know.
Next one, Ian. Here we go. And this is an Edgar Rice Burroughs style question.
All right.
Okay, John Carter of Mars or Carson of Venus?
John Carter of Mars.
See, I go Carson of Venus.
No, John Carter's the prototype Tarzan. It's the raw Burroughs. It's him figuring out how to write and what he wants to write about. You never quite capture the originality of that very first story. Although Tarzan, if you'd said Tarzan or John Carter of Mars, it'd be Tarzan.
Okay. That should have probably been the better choice.
All right, here we go.
This is the deal breaker here. If you answer something wrong, we're hanging up, man. I'm just kidding.
By the way, if you would ask me how this feels, it's so much like the Renaissance store where you go and there's the guy with his head through the stalks and they're throwing tomatoes at him. I'm just waiting for the one that's going to kick me right in the middle of the forehead.
No, I'm just kidding. Whatever you say is fine.
We're not hanging up.
Right. At all.
But in hindsight, I thought carefully about it, and in Alien, my money would have been, if after the captain, would have been on the cat.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
The cat would have saved the day.
Yeah, there we go.
That would have been kind of cool.
All right, next question, Ian. Sid Mead or Ralph McQuarrie?
Ralph McQuarrie.
Yes.
But again, you're talking about two of the greatest artists that ever lived, and both did truly amazing things, and I adore Sid Mead's work to pieces. Ralph's just more my cup of tea, and I love the humanity and the storytelling in his drawings. Truly amazing, and he's a wonderful man as well. I mean, so is Sid, so there you are.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, and Sid is still doing his thing. I mean, Sid's still doing the tutorials and things like that, too. So it's quite incredible.
Of course
you know, even though Ralph McQuarrie is as a personal part of my life that I owe to, so it's, you know, he's an incredible man as well.
Yeah, but you know, if you're asking me to rank them as artists, if that was the criteria, I wouldn't, because I don't look at art. I don't look at art that way. I sort of, for me, the creative juice, whatever it is, the muse, the force that draws, is universal. And if it comes out of me, Dermot Powers, Sid Mead, whatever, that's great. I don't care as long as it comes out.
Right.
You know, so I don't rank artists against each other. I just love to see them put their stuff out there. The thing I like best, though, is that they're really honest. You know, and that really, they aren't trying to be Sid Mead. They aren't trying to be Frank Frazetta. They're drawing the way they see the world. You know, because if that's all you got to offer the world in the end is who you are. And so the more honest you are about that, to me, the better the artist you are.
Okay. Here's another one. This is a toughie, too. Carrie Fisher or Natalie Portman?
Oh, Carrie Fisher.
Yeah, yes. All day long. All day long. That's my girl. That's my girl.
Well, no, because Natalie was the embodiment of a kid I created, and it's one of my children. I can't feel anything else from pride. I mean, Carrie Fisher came out as a kid in a movie theater, lusting after a girl with cinnamon roll hairstyle.
Right. Not to mention, she was strong enough to make the movie good to where it allowed for the prequels to come out. You know, so that in itself speaks volumes.
Whatever you want. I have two words for you: slave costume. End of conversation.
That's exactly right. And,
she's the quintessential Deja Thoris. You know, from John
exactly.
Carpenter's.
A prototype.
In that moment in Return of the Jedi, that was perfect.
Seriously.
Ian, the next one that Dwight's going to give you, now this is an easy one.
Yeah.
This doesn't even require any real thought or any kind of contemplation.
Oh, come on.
What is this, my wife or Carrie Fisher?
No.
We would never put you knowingly in that position, okay? That's not.
That's all right. It'd be my wife in a heartbeat.
There we go.
Right? No. Mark Hamill or Hayden Christensen?
Oh, Mark Hamill.
Oh, of course. All day long.
Yes.
Of course.
Once again, it's the cart before the horse. Once again, it's like you can have one of that.
But again, I really, really admire Hayden. I think he's a great actor. I've seen him in many, many other films and stuff, and he's really, truly takes his craft seriously. And Mark's gone on and done amazing voiceover work and other stuff. So, two both great actors. But again, just like Carrie Fisher, Mark hit me at the right time, and him still standing up in front of the two sons with that music. That's the scene. That's the moment.
It is. It really is.
That's it.
All right. Batman question. Christian Bale or Michael Keaton?
Yeah, that's a toughie.
Yep.
That's a toughie. Why can't you ask the easy ones like Jack Nicholson or Heath Ledger?
Well, that last one was a softball over the plate, so.
Right.
Tomato in the face. Okay, I'll probably go with Christian Bale for Batman and Michael Keaton for Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, I would say so. I would kind of say so, yeah.
Nice touch there. Nice touch.
Yeah. You kind of cheated a little bit, but we'll allow it.
Okay, good.
He plays along so
right.
well.
Very last one.
Last but not least, paintbrush or stylus?
Oh, paintbrush, duh.
All right.
Yeah, it's pretty simple.
You should have had a pencil or $1 million pencil.
Or in your case, a pencil's worth $1 million.
Yeah, exactly. That's cool.
So wait, I got one back for you.
Okay.
All right. It's the one they always ask. Flying or invisibility?
Flying.
Invisibility.
I was going to say, does anybody ever choose invisibility? So, why'd you choose invisibility?
Well, It will allow me to get in places that I shouldn't be and shouldn't. Allow me to be a fly. Well, you know what happens, Ian? It's kind of interesting you mentioned that, because what happens is it's people have two different types of faces. They have their game face and they have their regular face. Mm-hmm. When you're invisible and they can't see you, you get a chance to see their real face. So it'll be interesting to see what they really do behind closed doors, or how they really react when you're not there. Mm-hmm. That's the reason I like it.
So you got a curiosity to see behind the scenes and see what people are really like when they're by themselves.
Right. Plus the flying part. It's not the flying that gets you; it's the landing. So when it's time to touch down again, you're a big puddle. So
well,
you know, I'm just kidding.
I think a fair question might almost be flying or mind reading.
Mm. Ooh.
I don't know if I want mind reading.
Yeah.
Really?
I don't know.
That'd stop me. I wouldn't know which one of those to choose.
Mind reading. I don't know. I think ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. Yeah. Which kind of smacks in the face of my invisibility idea. But
That concludes this episode of Sidebar Forever, hosted by Dwight Clark, Swain Hunt, and Adrian Johnson. You can find us online at sidebarforever.com. Any emails or questions can be directed to us at sidebarforever@gmail.com. And also, subscribe to us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. Sidebar Forever is copyright 2020. Dwight Clark, Swain Hunt, and Adrian Johnson.